On Monday, Brazil showed up to a game that a lot of Brazilians probably thought was going to be relatively easy, and they ended up coming out with a 2-1 win against Japan, yes, but still a game that they struggled a lot and they required a last minute winner from Martinelli, who I don't think anybody really expected to do anything in that game. And I thought it was a really, really interesting game from a tactical perspective, mainly because I went into the game knowing that Japan was a really good team, but they surprised me because they played quite differently from what I thought they would do. So, let's just first of all, right? What what did Brazil do? So I'm gonna show you two maps right now to start off. Right, this is the touch map for Brazil for the entire first half. Right, you can see a lot of touches around this middle part, not too much around the box, quite a bit in build up. Right, this is in the second half. Now I'm gonna toggle between the two for a second. You'll notice there's not as much progression here in the middle, and a lot more seemingly in these wide areas, especially going deeper into the pitch. Right. So what did Brazil do? How did they go into the game? What did they change, and how did that allow them to win? So Brazil went into this game with kind of an interesting game plan, I thought, right? So Japan oftentimes for most of the game ended up going back and defending in a 5-4-1 deep block, right? The wing backs would drop in with the center backs, forming this wide first line of defense. And then the two defensive midfielders would form a line with the two attacking midfielders. And they ended up forming something like this. So Brazil, to start off, they had Vinicius in this kind of weird hybrid position in this half space, really pressed up against Tomiyasu, kind of partnering Cunha in the middle, with Douglas Santos holding most of the width there. And on the right hand side, it was a little more varied, right? Because most of the time, Guimaraes pushed up here. It'll be Paquetá, Casemiro, and then these three kind of. So you have this 5-man build-up. Sometimes Paquetá going slightly more forward. But sometimes it would be Danilo here and Ryan pushed into the half space against the defensive line. And I thought that was quite an interesting approach. But I thought it ended up kind of failing Brazil. So you can see here, right, this kind of 4-man higher block, right, with Vinicius more in the half space. So is Ryan, and the back line really pushed up wide. Fullbacks pushed up relatively high in the line of the Japan, midfield line. And the idea would be kind of to find these spaces to progress the ball through the middle. Right, you can see sometimes Ryan, for the most part, in the right hand side, not as much Vinicius on the left, would hold the width, while Danilo formed the back three, Casemiro, and then on occasion Paquetá dropping in. And it cost Vinicius, Brazil's best player in the tournament, I'd argue, to kind of fall into this weird, like, a not very comfortable position for him, right? So you can see here, you can just follow Vinicius, if you will. Vinicius asking for the ball here, not in a lot of space, threatening to make a run behind. Japan player follows him, and then trying to drop back in. Japan player follows him, but the entire time he doesn't really have any space to do anything, right? You know, Vinicius is someone who wants to receive the ball facing the goal. He wants to receive it with a little space and be able to create more space, but he can't really do that when he's like in this kind of congested middle of the pitch area, right? And I think that's where a lot of Brazil's problems in the first half came about, because when Douglas Santos would receive out wide, he did not have that many options, right? He would just kind of be stuck, kind of not being able to do much and having to go backwards a lot of the time, or whip hopeful balls in the middle, which Brazil did have the capability of winning the second ball, but often didn't. So it caused a lot of awkwardness and just not a lot of dynamism per se in the attack, which allowed Japan to push forward, right, to have better field tilt, right? So let me talk about field tilt, because it's something important, something that I skipped a few slides back. So field tilt, everyone knows the possession stats, right? which the percentage of passes in the game, which percentage was from one team, which percentage was from the other team. Field tilt only considers the passes in the opposition's final third. So field tilt for the most part shows kind of the territorial dominance that one team had over the other. And you can see the first half, it was Brazil only had 69% field tilt. And even when Japan were up 1-0, but they still had 36% field tilt. So 36% of the passes in the opposition's final third were by Japan and not by Brazil. But then in the second half, Brazil upped that to 88, right? Which is a 19% increase, right? You can see the entire time Japan were just cornered kind of up against their own box, right? So how did that happen? Well, it was a pretty simple change and one I've been alluding to this whole time. Vinicius and Ryan started playing much wider, right? Endrick came on, obviously, so he and Cunha kind of formed a partnership in the middle. Vinicius and Ryan would stay more permanently on the outside, and then it would be, yes, for the most part, a double pivot between Casemiro and Guimarães, but Guimarães would be able to move forward, have Casemiro there. What did this do? First off, it allowed Brazil to be a little more comfortable in the rest defense, right? It meant that Casemiro would probably have a little more issues covering in front of the defensive line, but the defensive line itself wouldn't be as exposed because the fullbacks would be in a slightly lower position, as you can see right here, right? Fullback. But it also meant that the wingers were allowed to receive the ball in much more space, right? So the fullbacks being slightly deeper meant that the Japan wingers had to kind of keep an eye on them, which meant that the wingers were kind of isolated one-on-one against the wingbacks, right? And then the outside center backs would struggle a little more to jump forward because of the two Brazil center forwards, which meant that the Brazil players would be able to receive the ball again facing forward, be able to push Brazil higher up the pitch, be able to actually put the Japan players up against their box, and really be able to dominate the game like that, at least territorially. Right? And that's where you see that field tilt stat that just increases dramatically in the second half, right? Now, just because you have territory does not mean that you automatically win a game, right? Excuse me. You still have to be able to do something with that. Now, Brazil, this team is actually built more for open space. So maybe you would say, yes, Brazil should have attacked more in behind this Japan team. Well, that just didn't happen. What they did do is that they put them back into their box and then did something that I really did not expect Brazil's team to do, and that's put in a bunch of crosses, right? And not only, right? So first of all, yes, being deeper in the pitch meant that the wingers would be able to receive the ball much more comfortably. It meant that Vinicius and Ryan, in the entire first half, they had 2 dribbles between the two of them, 2 dribbles, which only one of them came out successful. The second half, they had 7 dribbles. So that 3.5 times as more dribbles, and 4 of them were successful dribbles. Which tells me, obviously, that these wingers were able to receive the ball much more, were able to do much more with the ball than when they were in these half spaces, just kind of stuck, not being able to do much with the ball. Right? Second thing, the crosses. Brazil made 12 crosses in the entire first half. In the second half, 27. Right? And that's where the first goal comes from, right? So you can see Ryan over here being able to receive the ball out wide. Vinicius would probably be around here in the first half. This time much wider. It means that when Ryan puts in the cross, yes, there's 3 players against 4 in quite a small Japanese area. And you know that if you can just keep throwing out crosses the entire game, you will eventually get something out of it. And Brazil did get something out of it. So Ryan whips in across here, but the cross isn't successful. It rolls back over here. Vinicius manages to recover it. Goes to Gabriel there. The thing that crosses do really well is push the team even more further back, right? And it means that when Gabriel receives the ball here, all of a sudden, there's really not much pressure on him. And he's able to put his head up and put in a cross to the back post. And you can see here, there's now 5 Brazil players in the box ready to attack it, including Casemiro. It doesn't take a genius to know that Casemiro is really good at having the ball. He's one of the biggest threats in set pieces in the Premier League this season. And it means that he can head the ball right here and just kind of win that kind of war of attrition that Brazil forced Japan into. And it also meant that once Brazil equalized, it also meant that Japan wanted to come at Brazil more, right? They wanted to recover the win. And that's where Brazil's really good side was able to kind of show itself at moments and prove to me that Brazil are not a one-trick pony, right? That even when adapting to this kind of adverse, more possession, more territory dominant side, they're still able to take advantage of their best attributes, which is on the counterattack, right? So here, after a couple of turnovers, Brazil recovered the ball in the edge of their own box. Marquinhos, I believe that is. No, that's Danilo, excuse me. Immediately gets the ball to Cunha. Cunha gets it to Ryan. And then there's Vinicius over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Brazil players just immediately running at this Japan team, right? And because of these runs, Ryan is able to get his head up, pick out a good pass, and get it to Vinicius. And Vinicius, obviously, incredible in the counterattack, able to do just a beautiful, beautiful play. And it's a shame that this hit the post, because otherwise Brazil would have taken a game that looked like a stalemate that was gonna end up favoring Japan into the game that Brazil was set out to win, basically. And it's a shame that it only took until the 96th minute for Brazil to win it, because it definitely felt like they were gonna do something before that. So, what are the main takeaways from this game? First of all, Brazil can adapt, right? And I think that's one of the things that most led to the appointment of Ancelotti at the start of last year, I believe, which are that he's a great knockout coach, and he's also very good at adapting on a whim, right? Being able to see the circumstances that the game is in, be able to change the approach that the team has, and be able to get the best out of these players in different situations, right? So at first he thought, well, Japan are going to push up a lot. Let's isolate Vinicius against a center back, so that the basically the idea, I'm pretty sure, was have Vinicius go against the center back. That way the wing back jumps onto the full back, and then let Vinicius thrive in kind of all this space behind the right center back. Japan didn't let that happen because they stayed much deeper. And so Ancelotti thought, okay, well, if they're not going to let us have the space in behind, let's have the space out wide, right? Allow Vinicius to go up against the wing back and allow other players to stay in the box, waiting for the spaces to open out, right? So if the attacking midfielder goes with him, you'll all of a sudden have space for the fullback to put a cross in. And Japan can handle 4 crosses. They cannot handle 27 crosses, right? And it also tells me that Endrick is trusted, right? And Endrick, I do think, is going to be able to shine in certain games. I think that I thought it was kind of weird that he came on. I understand, obviously, Paquetá was injured. Who else were you going to bring on other than Endrick to allow Cunha a little more space? But it did kind of feel like an Igor Thiago game. Endrick is probably going to be better in more open games where, yes, Vinicius is going to take up the wide spaces, but there's still going to be tons of space in behind, tons of space in front of the defensive line, right? Spaces where Endrick is going to be able to kind of lose his marker and immediately go forward, right? That's not a game that Japan were ever going to let him play. Thank you all for watching. I'm gonna probably do a post on my Substack about the Norway game that's coming up. kind of like how Brazil should set up and how they can take advantage of Norway's weaknesses while covering their strengths. So stay tuned for that. That's in the channel description. And I'm probably going to also make a video on that and maybe another team if one of them sparks my interest in these next few games. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for the next video, and I'll see you all next time.